relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Mickelson Morley. It showed that the earth they don't move, huh? What they do? Shorten the length of the ruler. Hey, that's just how they fooled y'all. Tune in Wednesdays, bet that we gon' school y'all. Mickelson Morley. It showed no displacement. Nicholson, Gale, Pearson. It measured rotation. Let's break it down in layman. That means the Earth is stationed. No planets and spaceships. They're all animations. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend.
Warning. The following contains scenes that globularists may find disturbing. If you are suffering from cognitive dissonance, you may experience violent, degenerate, and erratic behavior. Viewer discretion is advised.
In a world. Welcome to Relatively Speaking, episode 10, titled Anything But God. It's going to be a good one. We're going to get right into it. Basic premise, mainstream scientism cloaked with the word science clings on to this completely falsified, nonsensical cosmology in a desperate attempt to explain existence without acknowledging some type of divinity or intention or creator. It's pathetic. Go ahead and get out in front of some of the stuff people say. God could have made the Big Bang happen, or blah, 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 blah. Just like people say God could make evolution happen. But we know abiogenesis, evolution, and these are all attempts to explain us without God. Same with this cosmology. It is insane. Now, this will clearly be twisted by some people to say, this is why I don't believe in it, because I'm religious. And no, that's incorrect. But we're going to get right into it. We're going to watch a couple of videos. I have them set up just a little bit. Thank you for the $5 super chat, Broderick. Shout out to my boy Question Answers, Witsit member for 10 months. And we will be rolling out all the new merch here soon. Drowning in tons of stuff to do. I'll talk to you guys about that at the end. We're going to jump right into the video. So, hopefully you guys enjoy the show tonight. You got any questions, hit me up in the chat. Super chats will be read off per usual. Shout out to all the legends in Rokfin. Justin Johnson, thank you for donating 5 memberships. Scoop them up. Welcome to the Misfits. Shout out to my boy always being a legend gifting memberships. And let's get right into it.
Central to this series has been the argument that cosmology is presently at a crisis point and headed towards an inevitable paradigm shift or revolution. And secondly, that the electric universe model has an important role to play in the cosmology of the future. The term paradigm shift underlines much of the series. It was made popular through Thomas Kuhn's seminal work, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Since the publication of this book in 1962, there has been much misunderstanding and/or misrepresentation of its overall thesis. Let's revisit Kuhn's work and clarify its meaning, and give some examples of why cosmology is still in crisis in 2023. It is important to note that Kuhn did not set out to write the book that he eventually ended up with. He originally set out to write a book about the history of science, and discovered something unexpected about how science is done along the way. In the process of exploring the history of scientific change, Kuhn discovered that predominant or institutionalized science operates much differently than how we've been led to believe it does. The larger and deeper thesis of structure is that predominant science ultimately
In fact, it operates as a religion. And this is very important in case you don't know this. Some fundamental aspects of understanding how to find truth, of course, the etymology of science, being to know. It is the process of seeking knowledge.
Does not do science the way it claims to, meaning that it is not absolutely empirical. Through a historical study of science, Kuhn discovered that once a paradigm becomes deeply entrenched and institutionalized, it often becomes dogmatic, hegemonic, and unyielding to falsification and change. Almost by accident, Kuhn's work became an interrogation of science in and of itself, and it paints an unflattering, but arguably more realistic picture of science than the idealized or utopian image of science as presented by, for instance, one of Kuhn's biggest critics, Karl Popper. Popper was an Austrian-born philosopher with a doctorate in psychology. For Popper, quote, the core scientific ethic was falsifiability, meaning that all knowledge, at all times, should be exposed to constant and deliberate criticism. End quote.
Very important. Karl Popper, of course, is famous for this, and falsifiability is crucial to anything that can even pretend to utter the word science.
Quote, this is what distinguishes science from non-science, according to Popper. Kuhn would wholeheartedly agree with Popper. Falsifiability.
And let's read it. Insofar as a scientific statement speaks about reality, it must be falsifiable. And insofar as it is not falsifiable, it does not speak about reality. Hence, not being science, when you say everything came from nothing and formed this material singularity that exploded and expanded in all directions with something called early dark energy, even though we can't define dark energy, and there's something called dark matter, which we can't define or detect, and it's never been detected, even though it's been looked for decades, etc.
Science, according to Popper. Kuhn would wholeheartedly agree with Popper. Falsifiability should be the core scientific ethic or principle. The problem is that in reality, or in practice, it is not, and this is what Kuhn's work reveals. Another critic of Kuhn was Austrian-born philosopher of science Paul Feyerabend. Feyerabend is most known for his book Against Method, wherein he argues that there are no universally valid methodological rules for scientific inquiry, and instead champions theoretical pluralism. Both Feyerabend and Popper accuse Kuhn of glorifying normal science and hiding behind it. Kuhn argued that science does not progress gradually or organically, but is actually forced to change due to crisis and model breakdown. This happens through a paradigm shift process with distinct stages. Normal science is the stage where a field or discipline has a scientifically based model of understanding that works and can properly guide the field. Because Kuhn uses the word crisis to describe later stages, Feyerabend and Popper accuse Kuhn of wanting science to always stay at the stage of normal science, and therefore of resisting paradigm criticism and change. This is a blatant misreading and misrepresentation of Kuhn. Kuhn did not insist that science should not progress beyond the non-problematic stage of normal science. On the contrary, he revealed and lamented.
Okay, so I'm going to let you see the name here of this video. Cosmology Still in Crisis 2023. Thunderbolt. We're going to skip a little bit.
In 2023, there have already been numerous expert panels and symposiums that discuss the growing crisis in cosmology and astrophysics. The crisis in cosmology centers around new information, measurements, and/or findings that undermine or contradict the major principles, assumptions, and/or expectations of the Big Bang Theory in some way. These include...
No, how dare you. Mike does. Thank you for the generous 5 membership gift. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Misfits.
New information or measurements that suggest that the universe is not expanding as we thought, or at all, known as the Hubble tension, that the universe is older or younger than the standard model claims, and that the universe is more or less homogeneous than we thought.
Okay,
there are also
now let's take a second to break these down.
Or contradict the major principles, assumptions, and/or expectations of the Big Bang Theory in some way. These include new information or measurements that suggest that the universe is not expanding as we thought, or at all, known as the Hubble tension.
Now, of course, we have recently covered the Hubble tension. Just a refresher, or in case you didn't get to see it, Hubble tension is pretty simple to understand. There is something called the Hubble constant. Okay? This is the rate at which it is assumed that the universe expands. I need to move that. So it is assumed that the universe expands for a very specific reason, because their model predicted that you would see redshift, blue shift everywhere, be random. The Earth is an insignificant portion of the universe. They looked out, they did not see that. It's oftentimes attributed to Hubble around the same time other people were seeing it, really in the 20s, dominantly 1925 to 1929. So, in order to explain away the fact that all evidence showed that the Earth was in the center and even the distant galaxies were moving in relation to the Earth specifically, which made no sense whatsoever in the current heliocentric gigantic universe model, ended up saying everything was expanding away from us in all directions, and that no matter where you are in the universe, it's going to look like you're in the center, just like an ant on a balloon that's blown up, or raisins in bread that is put in an oven and begins to rise as it's baked. Of course, that is stupid fundamentally and logically, as both of those things have a center. Not the point. Evidence showed that the Earth was in the center. This is not science. This is religion. They cannot have the Earth being the center because of the title of this stream. Anything but God, anything that requires divinity or a fine tuner or designer. So they said that the universe is expanding in all directions. This is called the Hubble constant, the rate at which the universe supposedly expands. And then you have something called the cosmological constant, which is the energy required for the universe to expand at this alleged rate. Now, this rate is where they run into problems. There's something called Hubble tension. The tension, of course, being the major discrepancy or inability to mesh the different measurements, primarily something called the ladder method in astronomy and something called the cosmic microwave background. These two different methods, as the CMB is supposedly looking at all the energy from the Big Bang, which it actually refutes it. We covered that in a previous episode. And the ladder measurements, when you compare these two measurements, built upon all their other presuppositions of how to interpret the things in the sky, they don't match. The rates at which they're supposedly measuring the expansion of the universe do not match, and they're not off by just a little bit, but they're out by up 5 to 7 megaparsecs, which is a mind-blowingly big number. Of course, to give you an idea of how big the number is, 1 light year is 5.88 trillion miles. 1 trillion is a number so big that it's hard to fathom. 1 trillion seconds would be 32,609 years or something like that. Over 30,000 years. That's 1 trillion seconds. If you were to take $1 trillion $1 bills and stack them up, it would be over 600 miles. Now we're talking about 5.88 trillion miles for 1 light year. And when you get into megaparsecs, it's an insane amount of miles. Distances, values that are absolutely insane. And these two values that they measure of the universe allegedly expanding within their own pseudoscientific framework of interpretation is significantly off consistently, and the more refined that the data and the instruments become, the worse the discrepancy remains. Even though they tried to shift the instrumental error margins, it still does not work. It's off by an insane amount. This is called Hubble tension. It debunks the claim of the expansion, but they would rather literally stop breathing, as their books would all of a sudden be useless. All of a sudden, their entire profession would be useless, and it might require them to acknowledge that there's a creator if there's a special or unique central position of the Earth, i.e. geocentric. So, there's Hubble tension. Let's quickly move on and explain the next one.
That the universe is older or younger than the standard model claims, and that the universe is more or less homogeneous than we thought.
Okay. Let's come back over here. Older or younger. Okay, they used to for a long time say, oh, the universe is between 10 and 20 billion years. Now they say it's 13.5 billion years old. This is built upon all kinds of other things. They're not just randomly saying numbers. They are forced to say certain numbers based on their presupposed pseudoscientific interpretations of things like redshift and all kinds of other flame phenomena in the sky. Anyway, so when they looked out, for example, further out into the universe, they saw that these galaxies were way too formed, way too big, bigger than the Milky Way galaxy, but should barely have had enough time to form at all, much less to be that big. So now they're having issues with the age of the universe and many other problems, like we covered last week. You got the horizon problem, the flatness problem, all kinds of fine-tuning problems, the Hubble tension problem, the redshift anomaly problem, all kinds of problems. We'll get more into those in a second. But then the more or less homogeneous, specifically, it's supposed to be homogeneous, but it's not homogeneous. It's anisotropic, meaning it has a preferred direction. And isotropic means no preferred direction. CMB showed that there was, in fact, isotropic inhomogeneous distribution that's centered on the Earth out of the entire cosmos. Makes zero sense literally. It's just hand-wave dismissed as instrumental error. Same with Michelson-Morley, instrumental error. Same with Hubble tension, instrumental error. They might as well just say, we bow to our pseudoscientific cosmology in an attempt to desperately avoid the inevitability of a creator. Moving on.
There are also numerous foundational predictions of the Big Bang Theory that have been contradicted by abundant observations, including various observations and accurate predictions made by electric universe proponents such as the late Walt Thornhill. The most recent problems have been sparked by even more contradictory measurements and observations that are coming back every day from the James Webb Space Telescope.
Side note, of course, as we saw with the quote-unquote Hubble telescope, we quickly found out you can put a plane up 40, 50,000 feet in the air and take really amazing and incredible high-quality, high-resolution pictures of the sky. Of course, as we continue to increase technology or improve technology of optics, you can do the same thing, have some type of platform high in the sky, look out in the sky. Whatever these pictures are coming from is not actually the point. The pictures are not matching their predictions, and they're also doctoring them anyway.
In a recent video, Mikio Kaku states that, quote, "The James Webb Telescope is upsetting the apple cart. All of a sudden, we realize that we may have to rewrite all of the textbooks about the beginning of the universe." End quote.
This is where all the people that say you guys are science deniers, and there are people that have been doing this for their entire life, and you think you're smarter than all the astrophysicists and theoretical physicists that went to school for this and did it for their entire life, get shown information such as this, which is from this year in 2023, and they quickly flip the script and say that they're quacks, they don't count, they're not really scientists, blah, blah, blah.
Well, that's the problem. The James Webb Space Telescope is upsetting the apple cart. All of a sudden, we realize that we may have to rewrite all the textbooks about the beginning of the universe. Now, it takes many billions of years to create a galaxy, like the Milky Way galaxy, with 100 billion stars, many billions of years old. But the James Webb Telescope has identified 6 galaxies that exist 500 million years after the Big Bang, that are up to 10 times bigger.
My daughter says, thank you. Shout out to Jeff's daughter. Happy birthday. Hey, feliz cumpleaños. Happy birthday.
To the Milky Way galaxy. That shouldn't happen. There should not be primordial galaxies that are bigger than the Milky Way galaxy that are only 500 million years old. Something is wrong. We may have to revise our theory of the creation of the universe.
In another recent video, Science 24 magazine reports that the James Webb
We are not allowed to revise our understanding of the universe because it is a religion to avoid the inevitability of a creator. Anything but God.
Telescope has discovered 6 ancient galaxies that shatter our understanding of the universe. Beyond these individual contradictions or discrepancies, the larger and deeper crisis has to do with standard cosmology's underlying narrative and its very approach to cosmology in the first place. As theoretical physicist Sabine Hossenfelder aptly pointed out at a recent symposium entitled "What is Wrong with Current Physics?", a good scientific explanation should, quote, "be as simple as possible, and you shouldn't add any unnecessary assumptions, no matter how much you need them to justify your hypothesis."
It should be titled, What is Not Wrong with Current Physics? Let's read this again. Your hypothesis should be as simple as possible, and you shouldn't add any unnecessary assumptions, no matter how much you need them to justify your hypothesis, i.e., dark energy, dark matter. What is dark matter? I don't know. We call it dark because it doesn't interact with light or any part of the electromagnetic spectrum. And despite decades of us trying to find anything such as a dark matter particle, because we're pseudoscientific particle physics built upon materialism, pseudoscience. She's 10 and smarter than most because of you. Oh, thank you. Tell her happy birthday. So they've been desperately trying to find these dark matter particles. They could never find it. Of course, that's pseudoscience. What is dark matter? They can't define it. They don't know. They claim it has to have some type of material characteristics, and that up to 83%. Let's just pop out a little rant on dark matter here. Dark matter doesn't matter. You know? Oh, how dare you? You're a racist. This is the truth, okay? 1933, Fritz Zwicky looked out at the galaxies and he saw, we have a problem based on our gravitational model and our cosmology. This doesn't work. The galaxy should be escaping the galaxy cluster, simply a cluster of galaxies. These galaxies should be escaping the cluster because there's not enough mass there to keep them within the cluster with gravity. Gravity supposedly keeping these galaxies in a little cluster. But we see them in the cluster, but they don't have nearly the mass needed according to relativity or Newtonian mechanics. So the current gravitational cosmology doesn't work. So it wasn't just a little off, it was off by 99%. The amount of mass observed was only 1% of the mass predicted and needed according to gravity. First time they discovered dark matter. They did not discover anything other than a major death blow discrepancy to the model, but again, it's not science. This is religion, anything but God. We must prop up the creepy psychopathic grabbler that is Einstein's pseudoscientific reification of conceptual abstractions such as space and time. Anything, literally anything but God. Oh, the apparatus contracted, you can just never tell, and time slows down, you can just never tell, and blah, 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 blah. That's dark matter. You got 1955, I believe it is, in the 50s. You have Vera Rubin, one of the people to first see that the galaxy rotational speeds did not match the gravitational prediction. Oh, well, we'll plug dark matter in there. So my theory, and you guys have heard me explain it, my theory predicts there's 100 pennies, there's only one penny there. Instead of saying my theory's wrong, I'll say actually there's 99 invisible pennies that act exactly like pennies, but you'll never find them. It's at such a ridiculous extent now that they claim that 83% of all of the matter in the entire universe is dark matter, but they cannot define that, they cannot find it, they cannot detect it, and they've never even been able to propose a viable explanation as to what it is. And it's 2023, that's almost 100 years. If there's a century of your hypothesis being directly refuted to such an egregious extent that it was 99% incorrect, and you've clung onto it, and still cannot define it or detect any semblance of such a thing, that is not science, that is a religion. Well, again, as your hypothesis should be as simple as possible, and you shouldn't add any unnecessary assumptions, no matter how much you need them to justify your hypothesis. That's the exact opposite of what they did with dark matter. Also, dark energy, that's the cosmological constant, where they need all kinds of energy to cause this universe to allegedly expand 4 times faster than the speed of light. And again, they don't even know how to explain why it's not expanding at the same rates with different measurements when they should all just be measuring the same alleged expansion of the universe. What is dark energy? We don't know, can't explain it. Oh, well, there's vacuum energy, and supposedly sky's a vacuum. It's not really a vacuum. It's impossible. So what do? We look at the vacuum on the Earth. We see that there's energy there. This solves our problem. Oh, never mind. We apply it to the mathematical needs of the cosmological model, and it's off by 10 to the 120th power, a mind-blowing discrepancy. Number that's almost hard to fathom, and there's really no almost to it. That is 120 zeros. Okay, so that didn't work. They just still call it dark energy. Now what do? They look back, they find out, oh, these galaxies are way too formed, way too big to be part of a Big Bang model like we previously predicted. Oh, there must be early dark energy that causes it to be different. How do you claim there's early dark energy that's different than dark energy, but you can't define dark energy in the first place? Doesn't matter. Just make a ton of unnecessary assumptions to plug together your model. Anything but God. And this is the reoccurring theme. It's always anything but God, anything but divinity, anything but special, unique position, anything. Literally anything. In fact, not only is anything permissible, you will be revered if you can come up with anything. Anything. Okay? And we could keep going, obviously, but that's a few examples of how they do the exact opposite of what she says in her speech here. It's really kind of pathetic. And another example is the inflaton, a particle that turns into matter eventually over time. We can never discover, can't define it, can't describe it, don't know what it is, can't detect it. No experiment will ever isolate such a thing. It's a made-up idea. It's not even properly defined, but there was inflation at the beginning to explain away the flatness problem and the horizon problem. If you want to know what those are, look back last week. If you begin to familiarize yourself with some of these basic concepts, the flatness problem, there had to be the perfect energy density so that the universe would expand out perfectly flat. It should be curved, whether that's negative or positive curvature. And for it to be perfectly flat, it would have to be right at zero. They say, well, it can't be perfectly flat. They can't even say that. So they say it's as close to perfectly flat as you can possibly imagine. It's like 0.00070 something zeros, 1. It's that close to zero. And it's just mind-blowing luck. And it just happened. So that was called a fine-tuning problem. There's no way that could happen without a creator, right? Just the perfect density so that the universe expands flat from a singularity. It's mind-blowingly impossible, mathematically impossible, statistically impossible. So they came up with the idea of the inflation theory that, oh, well, it used to be curved at the beginning, but this inflaton and this inflation based on the inflaton straightened out the curvature. What's an inflaton? I don't know, but now we don't have to explain the mathematical discrepancy because, again, anything but God. Then you have the horizon problem, that is that based on the speed of light in the alleged age of the universe, which is 13.5 billion years, then no particle in the universe could have traveled beyond a specific distance in a specific time because it can only go c. That's the maximum speed of light, which means that's the maximum speed of any particle carrying information. Now I'm going fast. I'm sorry. Maybe you can slow it down. It's a lot of information. But Okay, so if you have a speed equals distance over time. So if you have a time, 13.5 billion years, you have a speed, c, that's the maximum speed of anything in the universe, any particle, and you have a maximum time, which is 13.5 billion years, the entire age of the universe. Now that means that you have a very limited distance because you've already plugged the variables of speed and time, and again, speed equals distance over time. That means that you have to keep it to a limited distance. This distance out, this radius from a central point where you can go in a circle around you, a maximum distance, this is called the horizon. Right? It's like you look out and you can see a maximum distance around you called a vanishing point that people misidentify as the curvature, even though it's clearly an apparent location that constantly fluctuates, but I digress. I know this is one of my fast streams. I'm sorry. I can't predict them. I don't know when it's going to happen. This is clearly one of them. I don't want to drag all of this out too much. The point is that they, based on the idea that there is an even distribution of temperature and a homogeneous distribution, which there's not, but they ignore the CMB, called it the axis of evil, and just threw it away. Ironically touted it as verification of the Big Bang when it directly refutes the idea because there's anisotropic and homogeneous distribution centered on the Earth. They pretend that's not the case. They say it's instrumental error again, like they always do. And then they still have a problem called the horizon problem because these particles would have to interact with each other in order to maintain a homogeneous distribution, but they're far outside of their maximum horizon to have ever interacted with another one. There's not enough time in their model for them to have interacted. So it's called the horizon problem. To explain those away, they came up with the inflaton, the inflation. Now they're having an early dark energy, which contradicts that. We covered that all last week. Long story short, my point with all of that is they do exactly what she just said that you should not do. And of course, it is accurate. More specifically and simply, if you propose a theory, and then the evidence contradicts your theory is wrong. If your theory is void of falsifiability, it isn't science. It's the antithesis to science. It's effectively a religion, a belief system built upon the doctrine of men. It's a very dogmatic implementation of a belief system. And again, the motivation is anything but God. Okay, moving on.
End quote. It's interesting to note that simplicity is actually one of Thomas Kuhn's main criteria for model revolution and paradigm change. Hassenfelder maintains that the stories and assumptions of current physics are all, quote, creation myths written in the language of mathematics, end quote. She concludes that while we don't know if Big Bang creationists are wrong, we also cannot say that they are right because, quote, they just add this unnecessary structure at a time where we don't have any data, end quote. At the same symposium, Eric Lerner argued that the Big Bang is a theory that, quote, requires imaginary entities that are made up after the fact, end quote. He explains that without imaginary concepts and entities like inflation, dark matter, and dark energy, the theory basically collapses. These concepts were introduced to, quote, prevent or overcome severe conflicts with observation, end quote. For instance, as Lerner explains,
how's that not a religion?
Without dark energy, under the Big Bang, the universe would be younger than the Milky Way galaxy. And without dark matter, the universe wouldn't form any clusters or galaxies at all. He maintained...
Wait, what? So you had to come up with the unidentified, undefined, undetectable, pseudoscientific idea, or your model wouldn't work? Oh. So it's not science. It's just anything but God.
That, quote, you can't say that you want a pure Big Bang without all this fairy dust, end quote. Lerner concludes that we should look to alternative theories that rely on verified laboratory evidence and points to his own work on plasma phenomena as an example. In a very recent symposium entitled Beyond the Darkness, Dark Matter, a Baseless Hypothesis, scientist and professor John Joe McFadden points out, quote, decades of searching have so far revealed exactly 0 dark matter particles, and now some cosmologists are starting to look for alternative models of the universe that don't posit dark matter, end quote. For Eric...
The fact you're just always trying to look for particles is also, of course, another problem.
Lerner, the real crisis in cosmology is that the Big Bang never happened, a sentiment that is echoed by electric universe proponents. Whatever alternative one chooses to explore, it is becoming increasingly apparent that current cosmology and astrophysics are in deep trouble, or to use Kuhn's language, are presently at the crisis stage.
No, they've been there for over a century.
At the crisis stage, scientists continue to attempt to patch up the model, but also go beyond this, inventing convoluted ad hoc revisions in an effort to deflect or mask the mounting contradictions and inconsistencies. Now, with respect to the current crisis in standard cosmology, scientists are doing this and so much more. Many working within the standard model actually double down and triple down on the model's contradictions and inconsistencies, and have even gone as far as to celebrate them and characterize them as exciting opportunities for future research. One example is a claim made in a PBS Spacetime video entitled The New Crisis in Cosmology. In this video, The host argues that while contradictory measurements on how fast the universe is expanding, or the Hubble tension, are getting worse, this is actually exciting because the growing contradiction and crisis opens up new avenues for research. One can imagine that if and when the James Webb Telescope brings back even more contradictory measurements and observations, let's say that the Big Bang happened much, much earlier than they originally thought, that Big Bang scientists will again move the goalposts, giving them enough patchwork to keep them busy and in business for generations to come. This die-hard reluctance to question the failing model flies in the face of falsifiability.
That's what religions do.
Which, as we recall, is the underlying ethic of science, according to Karl Popper. The fact that science shuns falsifiability, which is supposed to be its fundamental principle, when it is most urgently needed, begs the question why. Either science is not...
Why would they lie? We talked about this 2 weeks ago. The primary thing is that it completely lacks falsifiability. Ask anyone that knows just a little bit of this information. Can you give me a concise, articulate way in which the Big Bang cosmology could be falsified, and they will not be able to even articulate an answer because it's a religion?
Not what Popper claims to be, or there's something else at play, or both. When viewed from a socio-cultural perspective, one begins to see power and hegemony at play, and this is what Kuhn's work strongly implies. What begins to emerge at the crisis stage is the idea that institutionalized and entrenched scientific models, and those working within them, tend to become more concerned with not relinquishing power and self-preservation than empirical observation and problem-solving, or the pursuit of truth and new knowledge. The main takeaway from Kuhn's work, and from the present state of cosmology, is that entrenched or institutionalized science does not do, or is not willing to do, what it claims to do. Test its theories and hypotheses empirically, and change course when needed. If that is the case, then can we still call it science?
No, of course we can't, because that's a religion. Okay, again, that is called Cosmology Still in Crisis 2023 Thunderbolt Projects. It's good. The rest of the video is good. It goes more to explain the science. It goes a little bit more into the details, some of the cosmological problems, a lot of which we do cover in here. Let me finally get situated with the move, and we'll get back to the PowerPoints. They're very time-consuming, but a lot of people have been requesting them. Okay, we're going to now watch another video. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that up to 1.5. The guy talks really slow, but if the 1.5 is too fast, let me know, and we'll pop it down to 1.25. 1.25 sounds like normal speed. So let's load that video real fast. This one is very good, and I will be doing a future stream on one of the things that's breezed through on this. I've been holding on to this for a while. I've actually mentioned it for some of the people that really pay attention to the stuff I say on here. I've mentioned this. I've been kind of leaving it in the clip or the mag, if you will, for a few reasons. Okay, so let me come over here, and I will let you know when we get there. And it's so bad. Again, I've said it a few times. I'm not sure. It's 100% game over. As if this whole stream hasn't already pointed out it's game over. You have to be suffering some serious cognitive dissonance to not know that. But this one is brutal. Let's go ahead and let's watch this video.
In the beginning, a long time ago and far, far away, there was nothing, which manifested a singularity, which exploded, and over millions and billions of years produced not only our vast material universe, but also life in the entire spectrum of the non-material or spiritual realm. So goes the Big Bang Theory, encapsulated in one long sentence. Let me reply with, first of all, there is no such thing as nothing, never was and never could be, because you cannot get something from nothing. Nothing nothings, as Heidegger said, about nothingness not being able to do anything. Nothingness is just and only a conceptual marker, like zero, used only...
I was thinking the same thing. Flash that warning again.
Warning. The following contains scenes that globularists may find disturbing. If you are suffering from cognitive dissonance, you may experience violent, degenerate, and erratic behavior. Viewer discretion is advised.
Only for contrast and mental reference. To posit otherwise is reification, making something unreal into something real, a violation of rationality, logic, and reason, a breach of intellectual responsibility. Secondly, since we are all...
And if you've been watching any of my debates or any of my content for a long time, it's one of my #1 talking points that I started off with. A lot of people already know this is, of course, a basic logic. It's elementary, in fact, but you cannot have nothing. Nothing does not exist. This is the same exact logical and philosophical postulation which refutes any such notion as there not being an ether, which is absolutely absurd. We have energy in a vacuum. We have propagation, quote unquote, in a vacuum, which is actually a rate of induction. We have wireless power induction in a vacuum. We have magnetic permeability and dielectric permittivity, that it's a dielectric and magnetic constant in a vacuum. We have the Casimir effect. In fact, we have a repulsive Casimir effect all inside of a vacuum. Waves are not things. I can wave my hand. I cannot hand you a wave. You cannot pull a wave out of the water. It's the water moving, which means when we see the waves, electromagnetic waves, in a vacuum chamber, that, of course, is not some type of corporeal entity in and of itself. Waves are a type of motion. Again, it's a verb. It's not a noun. Okay? You can wave the sheets on your bed. You can wave a towel. You can have waves in your pool, waves in your ocean. Again, wave your hand. But you cannot pull a wave out of any of those things because it requires the medium in which it's waving. You cannot have a wave without the water. Okay, well, we have electromagnetic wave, waving specifically in a vacuum chamber, which means what is waving? What is waving? So now, logically, we boiled it down, unless you're suffering from cognitive dissonance or standing up on some pseudoscientific denial of reality based on some egotistical, predetermined notion that you've been spouting for years, whatever it is. Those who, in which that applies to, knows that it applies to them. Then we have boiled it down to a very simple logical deduction. Something is moving inside that vacuum chamber, and it's energetic in nature. Now, side note, energy has never been properly defined in mainstream academia. So the question is, what is waving? Of course, the answer's simplified is nothing or something. Obviously, nothing cannot exist. Okay, that was a side note. That's never been rebutted, by the way, for all these people that freak out about me saying that there's an ether. There you go. It was that easy to show you that there's an ether. Have fun with that. Cry about it all you want to. Waves are just math. No, they're types of movement that are real, physical, and repeatable, observable, testable, falsifiable phenomena that we know exist. There's a type of movement that is electromagnetic in nature inside of a vacuum chamber. We know for a fact it cannot be a couple little gas particles that are inside there screaming about how it's not found in nature. It's all irrelevant. But anyway, moving on. So the point is, this is also a direct refutation of the theory of relativity, which of course says space and time come together, make a little space-time baby, and magically bend and warp. Of course, that is a reification fallacy. You cannot attribute concreteness to that which is merely conceptual. I cannot bend freedom unless you're the U.S. government. You cannot bend love. These are just conceptual abstractions. They are not physical. They're not corporeal. They're not material. They're not tangible. They don't have physical properties. They have attributes. You can give attributes to conceptual abstractions, such as a shadow. That's a privation. It's nothing in and of itself. It's the absence of light. Now, in fact, there is no such thing as absence of light specifically. A shadow is the absence of perceivable illumination, typically conflated with light. Again, I know this is one of those streams. I'm sorry. Okay, so it can be cooler when you stand in the shadow. That's an attribute, but a shadow can have no physical properties or properties in and of itself because it is nothing in and of itself. It's the absence of. Examples of privations. Nothingness. Just a concept, just like this video very properly identified. It is a standard, a conceptual standard in which we use to compare things to. That's it, right? Just like zero. So emptiness, nothingness, zero. Space, okay? Space is a conceptual quantification of dimensionality, Cartesian coordinate description of volume. Right? So we have length, width, breadth, length, width, height, right? So that's just a conceptual coordinate system we use to quantify area or volume. That's it. There's nothing in and of itself. It's a coordinate system. That's it. It's an arbitrary conceptual abstract coordinate system. It can't be anything in and of itself. Space is not what fills it. Now, if you watch my In the Field conversation with PhD astronomer Professor Parks, which I do encourage watching if you haven't seen it, we talked about this for about 20 minutes, and he ends up grabbing a book. I don't have any on my desk, they're back there, but he pulls out a book. He says, this book is space. I said, no, that's a book. That book is in space, because you can be like, that book is 7 inches long and 5 inches wide, and that's conceptual descriptions of the amount of volume it takes up, but it's a material, tangible, real thing. It's a book, and it's not space. Okay? If you've noticed, he really fumbled that part of the conversation because I don't know why this has gone overlooked for so long. Well, I do know why. It's, again, the title of the stream, Anything But God. But the point is, that space itself can't have properties. Tesla said this very quickly with a very concise and distinct refutation of relativity. He said, relativity cannot be correct because there cannot be curvature for the simple fact that space itself cannot have properties. This is correct. Okay, so anyway, that's a direct refutation of relativity because it attributes physical properties to that which is merely a conceptual abstraction, which is called a reification fallacy, attributing concreteness, so misplaced concreteness, is something that's merely conceptual or abstract. Now, we're going to take this all the way back to this point specific to this stream, which is the Big Bang. So the idea is that there's a singularity. By the way, another conceptual abstraction, which I think this video does cover, but where'd that singularity come from? Where it's just a boiled down, single, infinitesimally small, impossible to comprehend small, right, points that all material energy stems from. But where does that come from? Oh, nothing. Nothing cannot exist. It's insanely stupid, logically bankrupt, and like elementary. Nothing does not exist. I hate to break it to the nihilistic materialists that want to believe anything but God, but nothing does not exist. So what is the pre-existence? What is specifically the intention or determination before any type of existence as we denote it? All right, anyway, my point is it's very important to kind of understand this concept. Now, what you will see, you will never see any of the like zealots specifically and intellectually refute this point. They will never. So I encourage you to familiarize yourself with it. It's an easy way to refute all the pseudoscience, specifically the theory of relativity, specifically the notion that there is nothing outside the material world, that there's nothingness in a vacuum. Invoking nothing or nothingness or emptiness or space as if some type of real physical entity with properties it's like mind-blowingly stupid, frankly. Okay, so all that to say, like the idea of the Big Bang, the cosmology in and of itself, in its fundamental foundation, is so logically bankrupt, it's inadmissible and intellectual. Boy, that was edifying for some people.
Warning. The following contains scenes that globularists may...
Sorry.
All familiar with the concept of nothing, the average person should be able to realize that you cannot start creation with it. But a material...
Okay, let me address. So they claim space is 5 atoms per cubic meter. No. So what they say is there's no such thing as a perfect vacuum because there's at least a few hydrogen atoms per cubic meter. Yes. But space is not the atoms. The atoms are in space. Okay. First of all, atomism is pseudoscience. It doesn't matter. Let's pretend it's not. The atoms are not space. They're in space. Planets, quote unquote, are not space. They're in space. Material is in the space. If I fill a vacuum with gas, that gas is in the space. The space is the Cartesian coordinate system we use to quantify the volume, dimensions, that we then fill with other things. The few hydrogen atoms per cubic meter, it's the per cubic meter. The cubic meter is the space. Okay? The matter, the atoms, the gas particles, they fill space, which is conceptual quantification of dimensions. So if they say they don't understand basic logic, again, vacuums are no such thing as perfect vacuums. There's at least a few hydrogen atoms per cubic meter, meaning that those atoms fill the space. Moving on.
Material singularity is an unknown, a more effective yet an even worse reification, and is nothing short of cosmological chicanery. This would seem to be why some cosmologist speculators are replacing nothing with inflation and quantum fluctuations. Is it not germane and crucial to understand why these dystopian concepts were ever devised and gained traction in the scientific community? But more on that later. So, what is a singularity? Is it not just a fabulous invention that can do whatever the theorist needs it to do? In the early days of modern science development, the new, more rigorous approach needed to throw off the oppressive trammels of reality-defying religious dogma and sacred writings, and rightfully so, to uncouple from all mythology. Of late, the marvelous James Webb Space Telescope is making waves in the astronomical and cosmological world of scientism. Some even characterize the effect as inspiring panic. Right now, I find
I'm really not wanting to come off frustrated, so I think I'm just going to drop the topic. I'm going to address it one more time. I just addressed it so simply. I'm confused. But no, those atoms do not fill the space. There's just a few atoms per square meter. Per square meter, the square meter is the space. So space is length, width, breadth. The Cartesian coordinate system used to describe the dimensions of volume. It's a concept. It's an abstract. It's a mathematical description that we utilize. It's very useful. But you cannot hand me a length. You cannot hand me an inch. You cannot hand me a foot. Just like time is conceptual quantification of change in motion. You can and what we perceive to be passing. Which is actually not linear. Side note. You cannot hand someone anything to do with space. It's merely conceptual. Merely conceptual. In order to have any type of real valuable meaning to length or an inch, you must be materially measuring something. It must be something that's real and physical. Space is conceptual abstraction. They say now a lot of people that try to rebut the ether thing, they say, oh, there's no such thing as vacuums in nature. There's no such thing as a perfect vacuum. That's irrelevant. We know how much energy comes from a certain amount of gas pressure. So the lowest amount of gas pressure you can get inside of a vacuum chamber cannot give you the amount of energy that we see there, and something's waving. So what's waving? It can't be something called a photon that's a massless particle that has no magnetic properties or charge, but it's always found electromagnetic radiation, but it's not electric or magnetic, but you can never find it without electromagnetic radiation, all that pseudoscientific nonsense. Okay, and it's not just light, by the way. Then again, it is just light in properly defined because light's not just perceivable light. I don't want to get too distracted. Suppose there are no hydrogen atoms in that square meter, then it's empty space. Yes, but my point is that if you have hydrogen atoms inside this vacuum chamber, the hydrogen atoms are not the space. They're in the space. That's why it's a few hydrogen atoms per cubic meter. Okay, I can't describe that anymore.
I find myself lying awake at 3 a.m, says Alison Kirkpatrick, an astronomer at the iPhone telescope, is making waves in the astronomical and cosmological world of scientism. Some even characterize the effect as inspiring panic. Right now, I find myself lying awake at 3 a.m, says Alison Kirkpatrick, an astronomer at the University of Kansas, and wondering if everything I've done is wrong. Well, that's the call from this corner, Professor Kirkpatrick. It's about time, and it makes no difference if establishment cosmology pressures you enough to recant. The new exquisite graphic vistas are providing clear and extensive viewing of a vast volume of space and bringing back images that are nothing like you would expect from a violent explosion and its implied expansion. Most people, including many astronomers and cosmologists, realize these images are not like more nebulous hypotheses. They should be increasingly unwilling to conclude that what they are seeing is a manifestation from their own lion eyes. Such good old clarity and vision may sometimes cut through unworthy hypotheses and false theory, especially when many of the theorists already have an uneasy feeling about the foundational assumptions underpinning the Big Bang. From my learning and perspective, the premier astronomer to this point in time was Halton Arp, who earned his PhD from Caltech. For 29 years, he did his stellar work at Palomar Observatory, where he and his associated astronomers, Jeffrey and Margaret Burbidge and others, cataloged enough examples of highly redshifted quasars that were clearly in front of lower redshifted galaxies.
Boom. Boom. So I have said this a few times. What you're going to find is no one. If you really do stick around for these series, you're going to be equipped with stuff you can bring up to any PhD astronomer or astrophysicist. Let's listen to this again. I slowed it down.
Cataloged enough examples of highly redshifted quasars that were clearly in front of lower redshifted galaxies in the background.
That is game, set, match. Good game, boys. Nice playing with you. Welcome to the poster you just got dunked on. Ever seen the Michael Jordan poster where he's just like tongue out, palming the ball? It's over. I assure you, it is over. So again, if you don't understand, there are quasars which have way too much energy and they have way too much redshift, and they're closer than galaxies that have less redshift. Now, Let's think about this simply. They think that everything's expanding away from every single point. That in and of itself is logically bankrupt and ridiculous. Of course, they claim that everything expanded and accelerated out after an explosion from a singularity, which they can't even apply gravitational mathematics to at all whatsoever. Relativity can't even be applied to a singularity. Side note, singularity can't even be proven or defined. Side note, singularity is a pseudoscientific conceptual reification. Side note. Then everything starts in a singularity and explodes and expands out from that central point, but there's no center. That's an oxymoron and a paradox. Side note. So they say that everywhere is perceivably the center for that reference point. Okay? So no matter where you are, it's going to look like you're in the center. Now, of course, this is again another part of their unfalsifiable religion, because you would have to, in theory, go way outside of our galaxy to see if that's true. Even within their pseudoscientific paradigm of space travel, they can't get anywhere close to that far. So it's just an unfalsifiable band-aid once again, so they can keep their religion going. Again, the lack of falsifiability is the antithesis to actual real science or any type of pursuit of knowledge. Of course, observations alone aren't natural science anyway, but we're not going to get too distracted. So here, we're in a single point, and everywhere we are, it's going to look like we're in the center. That's the current cosmology of 2023, and it's been that way for about a century. Again, why? We covered this many times on this episode, on this series, but it's because they looked out, they expected the universe to be expanding from that center point, which means if I'm tucked away in some insignificant corner over here, and the Big Bang happened way over there, well, I'm over here on the Earth, tucked away in a little bitty dark insignificant corner, so I'm going to see things going left, right, up, down, all directions, redshift, blue shift, more redshift, less blue shift, all over the place. They're not going to care about us on the Earth because we're just in a tucked away little corner. That's not what we saw. Everything moved with us in the center. Everything that we observed, no matter how far out into space we looked, everything showed the Earth was in the center, so they had to fix that. So again, it's a religion, so it has to be built upon unfalsifiable band-aids. It can never be conceded because, again, anything but God. And if the Earth is in the center of the universe or the cosmos, that means that obviously it was placed there. So the point being that they say everything is expanding away from everywhere at the same time. So on the Earth, everything's expanding away from you. So it makes you look like you're in the center. What does that mean? They say that redshift is the evidence that everything's expanding away, like the Doppler effect. As things move away from you, then they move closer towards the red end of the electromagnetic spectrum. So that's the evidence that everything's expanding away from us, is redshift. Okay, now there's all kinds of problems. We'll cover redshift in the future. I have a PDF with over like 400 references about redshift anomalies that still can't be explained. We have redshift and blue shift where it shouldn't be, blue shift where it shouldn't be. We have different levels of redshift and uneven distribution of redshift. We have, anisotropic, meaning a preferred direction of redshift in the wrong direction, and too much redshift at that point in space, and all kinds of other things. We'll cover that in the future. But very important, I'm going to slow down because I want everyone to get this point. All right. So you're supposedly on the Earth. Everything's expanding away from you, and the evidence of this is allegedly redshift, which means as things are further and further away from you, they should be redshifting more and more. It means as we look out, we should see more and more redshift. Now, stuff like the Andromeda galaxy is actually blue shifting, so they move the goalpost again. They say, oh, well, those are just local galaxies, and they're actually moving away from us. They just look like they're blue shifting because we're close enough to see them moving in other directions as well. Okay, cool story. Right? Always move the goalposts. Now, if everything's expanding away from us, and I guarantee you, none of the zealots that are going to frequent these shows, none of the astronomers, astrophysicists are going to be able to give you an actual answer to this. If everything's expanding away from us, that means the further away it is, the more it should be expanding. The more it should be redshifting, because it's further away. It means it should be redshifting more and more the more we look out. They saw quasars that were closer than certain galaxies, and the quasars were more redshifted than the galaxies. That is impossible. Point blank, period. Game, set, match, checkmate. You got dunked on. GG. Like, there is no recovery from that. You staked your flag, because this is the truth. There is a creator. There is intrinsic design to this place, and no matter how long you fight it, you can only survive so long because your theory is a lie. And it's wrong, so it can't work. So you just keep on moving the goalpost, Oh, well, sure, it looks like we're in the center, but it's going to always look like we're in the center, and it's just an illusion, I promise, and I promise the apparatus contracted what you can't tell, and all this pseudoscience. Okay, come to find out, you had to stake your flag in the idea that space is expanding away from the Earth in all directions. The further away it is, the more redshift there will be because it's expanding away from you. They saw quasars with way more redshift than galaxies that were further away than the quasars, and not just a couple times, a lot. That is the end of the Big Bang cosmology. I don't care what anyone wants to say about it. Either rebut it or just don't say anything. Just don't even say anything. I'm keeping an eye out for a couple of these guys that are going crazy. Rebut that specifically. There you go. You guys can go to anybody. Just shut it down. Just shut it down. Because there is no answer to that. Let me explain one more time. They claim that we're not really in the center because that would mean there's a God. And again, anything but God. Anything but Yah. So, well, it just looks that way. It's just an illusion because everything's expanding in all directions. So no matter where you are, like if you're an ant on a balloon that's being blown up, since it's expanding, that little bitty ant's going to look out and think that they're in the center because everything's expanding away from them. So no, it's going to always look like you're in the center, but it's just an illusion, and there is no center, even though there was a singularity that supposedly exploded and expanded in all directions, which would be center, and the expansion would be central to that. But anyway, you're on a balloon, you're a little ant, and you look around, and the concept makes sense, right? You're a little ant on a balloon that's blowing up. If you're looking from that little ant's perspective, you're not going to be able to tell that the center of the balloon is actually way over here where the balloon got blown up, because all you can see is just the immediate area, right? It's just going to look like it's expanding away from you because it is, right? It's expanding relative to you, although it's actually expanding overall. Now, the analogy is stupid because the balloon does have a center that it expanded out from and got blown up from and inflated from. But anyway, so the idea is that that ant looks out, can't tell because it's going to look like they're in the center even though they're not. They had to say this because all the evidence showed the Earth was in the center when they specifically predicted it wouldn't do that. Distant galaxies far outside the local region still move specific to the Earth, which makes no sense. In fact, the galaxies complete a circuit every year. Oh my gosh, it's almost like the sky's a clock and the Earth is in the center or something, and maybe it's special and maybe you have moral accountability, anything but God. So they looked out and they said the evidence of this is redshift. The fact that everything is redshifting is actually evidence for our heliocentric idea in our cosmology. I hope that I'm incoherent enough that everyone's following me. The prediction was that there was a singularity, everything expanded away from it, so the Earth is in a tucked away insignificant corner. So when we look out, we're going to see redshift, blue shift, things going up, down, left, right, everywhere, completely disregarding the Earth. No one cares about the Earth. That was the prediction. What did we see? Everything moved specific to the Earth, around the Earth, like the Earth was in the center. Everything moved specific to the Earth as if it were in the center. They shifted over and they said, okay, everything's going to always look like we're in the center. That's when Hubble says you can never disprove the idea of the Earth being in a central position, but we avoid that possibility at all costs. It's intolerable, and it's the horror of a special and unique position must be avoided unless last resort, basically. So they say, okay, well, yeah, we saw all the redshift, and we shouldn't have seen that. We should have saw redshift and blue shift all over the place, right? So we saw nothing but redshift, which they don't. You know, the Andromeda Galaxy, etc., is blue shifting, but anyway. So they say, okay, that's actually evidence for the fact we're not in the center. So the evidence for the fact we're not in the center is that everything looks like we're in the center and that it isn't redshift and blue shifting randomly everywhere like the model predicted if we weren't in the center. So that's actually evidence that we are in the center. This is an important point I want to point out to you guys. One of the most effective tactics ever that is oftentimes implemented is when something actually refutes their theory, they absorb it and then invoke it as if evidence or verification of their theory. It's so off-putting, it's a curveball. You never think to look there to refute it because they're invoking it as evidence. They do the same thing with cosmic microwave background, which specifically refuted their cosmology because it showed that there was an anisotropic and inhomogeneous distribution centered on the Earth. They call it the axis of evil. Well, they say, oh, that's instrumental error. We'll leave that part out. And then they invoke the cosmic microwave background as verification of the Big Bang. Right? It's a very useful tactic. It's a psychologically manipulative wizardry spell, and it's very useful if you want to manipulate people. So it's not useful unless you're degenerate and deplorable. But anyway, so we're going to come over here. Everything's expanding away, and that's supposedly why it's redshift. So they moved the goalpost over to that. Okay. They looked at quasars, and they had way more redshift than galaxies that were further away from them. It's over. doesn't make any sense. You staked your flag in expansion because you were forced over there. You were forced in that corner to stake that flag because your religion sucks and is stupid. Your hatred of a creator forced you into a corner. You staked the flag. The universe is expanding, and redshift is the evidence. And the further away that things are, the more redshift there will be. It's like the Doppler effect. Okay. And really, there's like a slight difference in Doppler effect and cosmological redshift, but we'll cover that later in the redshift stream. They saw that the quasars had more redshift even though they were closer than other galaxies that had less redshift. That's impossible, fundamentally impossible with the claim that redshift is evidence that everything is expanding. Okay, moving on.
Of course, this is an unequivocal violation of expanding universe theory. Being a respected and highly qualified astronomer in the 1970s, he went to the astronomical community.
Dude, you guys, the chat is on one tonight. Okay, can you guys do me a couple favors? One, please don't spam all caps. Please. Don't spam all caps in the chat nonstop. I'm going to put slow mode on. You're going to make me put slow mode on. Everyone just likes to talk and have a good time, so please just calm down. Secondly, why don't you answer? Bro, I'm trying to cover specific subjects and you're asking questions that aren't related to my actual stream. Like, the dark part where there's a few gas particles is real. I saw your question, but that's not the subject of the stream. Now you're saying, so you agree that galaxies and quasars are real? Where are they relative to the dome? Why don't you answer? I'm assuming you're an anti-flat earther. I don't know. I'm going to have to ask you to chill. Okay. First of all, the phenomena that we see in the sky is real observable phenomena. We 100% see this stuff in the sky. We see stuff that people call galaxies. We see stuff that people call planets. We see stuff that people call stars. We see stuff that people call quasars. We see stuff that people call redshifts. Okay? We do observe this phenomena. It's a fact. Where is it in relation to the dome? I think that there are different plasma layers inside of a torus field, and that would explain literally all of it. All of it. It would explain the rotation and counter rotation. I will integrate that into a model that I'm making and explain it later. Okay. I've answered your questions. Do not spam all cap questions unrelated to the subject. And why are you not answering? You're scared to answer and just spamming the chat. I'm going to time you out before I have to put slow mode on and kill the vibe for everyone else. Okay. We're going to go back to the subject.
Expecting them to see and address the ARP group's findings. They didn't want to hear it for reasons that should be obvious. Too drastic violation of established lower redshifted galaxies in the associated astronomers, Jeffrey and Margaret Burbage and others, cataloged enough examples of highly redshifted quasars that were clearly in front of lower
Shout out to Cammy. Good night. Much love.
redshifted galaxies in the background. Of course, this is an unequivocal violation of expanding universe theory. Being a respected and highly qualified astronomer in the 1970s, he went to the astronomical community, expecting them to see and address the ARP group's findings. They didn't want to hear it for reasons that should be obvious. Too drastic violation of examples of highly redshifted quasars that were clearly in front of lower redshifted galaxies in the background. Of course, this is an unequivocal violation of expanding universe theory. Being a respected and highly qualified astronomer in the 1970s, he went to the astronomical community, expecting them to see and address the ARP group's findings. They didn't want to hear it for reasons that should be obvious. Too drastic violation of established theory, too much controversy, too much damage to their standing and careers. Being patient, gracious, and experienced, aware of the sordid history of scientific pioneers being treated as pariahs, like Galileo and Semmelweis, ARP felt this time it would be different if he was patient and careful enough to compile the group's findings in a composite and convincing way. Thus, he authored and published the book Quasars, Redshifts, and Controversies, 1987, portraying and explaining why they should listen. No deal. Still no response except a growing distancing and alienation. Welcome to the cruel dystopian world, Dr. ARP.
Red and blue shift are vibrational and they may not indicate direction at all. That's correct. I'll try to cover all that in the redshift stream. You can have attenuation, you can have plasma causing redshift, you can have magnetic electromagnetic retardation causing redshift, many other things. I will cover that soon.
After about 10 patient years, he got exercised and authored another book with a double entendre title, Seeing Red, June 1997. Seeing Red was an obvious reflection of not only redshift, but of how he felt. When I met ARP at a June 1999 symposium organized by the University of Milano Bergamo in Lombardy, Italy, we were fellow lecturers. I had my copy of Quasars, Redshifts, and Controversies with me in anticipation of getting it autographed.
If anybody wants to gift your boy a book, that's the one I currently want. LJ, thank you for the $5 super chat. The Apollo 11 Freemasons who set up the first fake moon scenery copied Marooned, a 1969 film before the first moon landing, and predicted everything. I've never heard of that. That's pretty interesting. Thank you for the super chat.
When we talked, and he realized I was representing a group of admirers and supporters of his findings, he not only signed my copy, but gave me an autographed copy of Seeing Red. The ARP group developed a sterling case for a paradigm much superior to the Big Bang. They showed...
Sorry, I'm going to have to stop reading the chat. Is this a flat earth proof? If you have to ask that question, you're not paying attention. This isn't about flat earth. I won't claim it's a flat earth. This is about how the current heliocentric model and its cosmology is provably wrong. It is a religion. It is propped up by people that are egotistically defending an archaic dogmatic consensus because most of them have philosophical motivation, which is summarized in the title of the stream, which is anything is acceptable except God.
That certain unusual pregnant galaxies with active galactic nuclei, some of which are called Seyfert galaxies, evidently charge up and give birth to, expel from their cores, twin quasars in opposite directions. These expulsions are usually perpendicular to the plane of the galaxy. These expelled highly redshift quasars slow in velocity over time while losing redshift in quantized steps. They ultimately differentiate into new galaxies. Thus, we have the growing universe increasing in size instead of a violently exploding or expanding one. This, of course, is a much more orderly process, which is what is reflected and portrayed by the James Webb Telescope visuals. What these images show is an extensive array of stars and galaxies that are all connected by a three-dimensional web of shining helical filaments. In the electric universe paradigm, these are the intergalactic and/or interstellar Birkeland currents that deliver power to these astral constructions. This was the vision and understanding of Nobel Prize-winning Hannes Alfvén and his protege.
Oh, he's a Nobel Prize winner? Oh, he's a quack. He's a quack. If he doesn't agree with the status quo, he must be a quack. Obviously, I'm not appealing to his authority because I don't care if he won a Nobel Prize.
Anthony Peratt, which they called the plasma universe. I should also mention that the Big Bang, gravity-only dominated theory, along with galactic revolution rotation problems, laid the foundation for the fantasy creations of dark matter and dark energy. Big Bang dark matter was always a huge enigma, and dark energy was even more egregious. These both now have to be rejected as well. But there are so many options for colorful, or should I say...
Thank you for the $7 super chat. Are you going to do a StreamYard this stream? I'm close to Flat Earth from your stream. Just have a few questions I want to ask you first. That's Schooling Globers on Wednesdays. You can jump on and we'll have a conversation.
Say colorless replacements. If dark ambrosia doesn't completely satisfy this penchant for scientismic mysticism, I see all kinds of other options. We could have dark entropy, anti-momentum, dark volume, anti-charge, dark movement, anti-shape, dark time, anti-size, or some other esoteric combination that will, quote, save the appearances. I suspect there are 666 possibilities. You get the idea. When defenders of establishment cosmology have been braced by the accepted fact of plasma in space, the reply has been generally along the lines of, yes, but it doesn't do anything. Those of us that understand the validity of the electric universe paradigm and theory are impatient to see all of these intellectually ungainly abstractions swept off the scientific cosmological table. There are many, including myself, that have never been able to fathom a universe with life and all that goes with being human, springing up spontaneously.
All right, this is an important part of it. I'm going to put it on normal speed. Everyone should pay attention, especially if you are still clinging on to this belief.
Save the appearances.
It's crazy how I got to do 1.2. I can't. He talks so slow. All right.
Movement and of other files. There are so many. These both now have.
Okay. Now let me do this real fast.
Warning. The following contains scenes that globularists may find disturbing. If you are suffering from cognitive dissonance, you may experience violent, degenerate, and erratic behavior. Viewer discretion is advised.
Evolution rotation problems laid the foundation for the fantasy creations of dark matter and dark energy. Big Bang dark matter was always a huge enigma, and dark energy was even more egregious. These both now have to be rejected as well. But there are so many options for colorful, or should I say colorless, replacements. If dark ambrosia doesn't completely satisfy this penchant for scientismic mysticism, I see all kinds of other options. We could have dark entropy, anti-momentum, dark volume, anti-charge, dark movement, anti-shape, dark time, anti-size, or some other esoteric combination that will, quote, save the appearances. I suspect there are 666 possibilities. You get the idea. When defenders of establishment cosmology have been braced by the accepted fact of plasma in space, the reply has been generally along the lines of, yes, but it doesn't do anything. Those of us that understand the validity of the electric universe paradigm and theory are impatient to see all of these intellectually ungainly abstractions swept off the scientific cosmological table. There are many, including myself, that have never been able to fathom a universe with life and all that goes with being human.
This is a cartoon.
Never been able to fathom a universe with life and all that goes with being human, springing up spontaneously or developing from mere non-living, non-intelligent matter. The universe is obviously infused with design, and we are spiritual vessels with personality, intelligence, intellect, emotions, purpose, principles, values, and will. This would seem to demand an intelligent creator or designer with purpose as well. Given the deplorable human condition of struggling and suffering, culminating in death, it is an entirely different issue whether that agency is worthy to be worshipped rather than feared, and thus called God, a term that is a contraction of good. Our world has around 4,000 different identifiable organized religions, in which I include the most dominant of them all now, Scientism. Scientism is the making of a dogmatic religion out of the pursuit of science or knowledge, which, as we all know, has a sordid history of always resisting significant new truth that challenges the existing paradigm.
Very important part there. Even if you were to be so lost in the sauce that you still believe this after we consistently intellectually eviscerated on this channel. It's ironic because throughout all of time, all of these theories that you are currently fed and told are true were fought against rigorously. For example, when Einstein first presented his idea, which he stole from Henri Poincaré, hilariously enough, he was laughed out of the Royal Astronomical Society. Everyone thought it was absurd. The idea that you were going to get rid of the Newtonian framework in an absolute background was just insane. Like, get out of here. You're stupid. Oh, you're trying to undermine all of electrical field theory? Cool story. You crazy psychopathic dude that forgets to wear clothes and wants to have sex with his daughter. We're out of here. Get out of here. He was laughed out of the room. Now, they all tell you Einstein was the biggest genius ever, and his theory was incredible. Point being, of course, his theory is stupid, reification fallacy on its face. The point actually is that even within this scientism paradigm, they always move towards a new theory that they previously ridiculed. You will always have people that will ridicule you until the mainstream comes along and says, hey, now you can change your mind. This is your new belief. And just like the priesthood of a religion, people then adopt their new belief, as if the Mormon church with prophets. The prophet now says, okay, your new belief is dark matter. Okay, we believe in dark matter now. Okay, it's a religion. frankly. That's what it is, by definition. A belief system void of empirical evidence built upon the doctrine of Femin, which is upheld with rigid dogmatic devotion. Which is why, just under the description at the end of every stream, I point out that the weak finds contentment in the consensus of ignorance. They also do not think for themselves. I encourage you to step back and just think about how illogical and paradoxical, intrinsically contradictory that approach is, even within the realm of the current Scientism. All of their current beliefs were previously ridiculed until they were forced to at least move the goalpost over there to try to keep this dying religion alive.
Warning. The following
The multiplicity
contains
of concepts of God in these various religions, many of which are ugly and alien to humane beings, have always violated our sensibility and idealism. Yet many cling to these prevailing bad or anti-God paradigms like lichens cling to rock, as if their lives depend on it, which they clearly do not, given that we all age, decay, and die, regardless of which of these religions we profess. Maybe this lack of intellectual responsibility and integrity is the problem. I am unaware of anyone in Western science or religion that doesn't understand and accept that the very foundation of the physical universe is binary electric charge. This is manifested in negative electrons, positive protons, with neutrons that decay into these charged particles.
Pseudoscience. Truth is that it's different modalities of the same thing. What is it? It's actually excitation of the background medium, which is pure potential in a state of inertia that everything then becomes a modality of an excited version. And when in disequilibrium, it's manifested as what we call energy, including electricity or what they call charge. Of course, there is no such thing as positive and negative charge. There's nothing more than charge and discharge. It's actually a verb, just like waving is a verb and it's not a noun. But materialists must cram material, tangible denotations and terminology on everything that exists, because materialism boldly proclaims one of the most ignorant and logically bankrupt ideas ever, that everything that exists stems from matter or a version of it. Everything that exists is material or comes from material. And that is ignorant. But the point, of course, here being is that the foundation of all things seems to be electric in nature. Well, what is electric? It's an excited modality. So, of course, what they call these different particles are all different modalities of the same thing, which is an excited version of the background.
The material universe is electric. Maybe someday soon, more people can become reasonable, intellectually honest, and responsible, and open-mindedly consider a much more elegant and beautiful vision, one that in both realms is based on the evidence of historical demonstration, a vision that we can 100% go all in for.
Okay. Shout out to Lisa for being a Miswit for 8 months. So edifying as usual. Thank you for your time, because your content is definitely worth mine. Great work, brother. Much appreciated. God bless. Thank you so much for the kind words and for being a Miswit so long and a generous support. All right. Cool. So there were just a couple videos. We could watch more. I could cover all kinds of things. Sorry, I did talk kind of fast. We're at about an hour and 20 minutes. I'll chat with you guys for a second, but I do just have like a million things going on, so I'll kind of let you guys know what's going on. But to wrap up the subjects, right? It is titled Anything But God, and this is the truth, right? There's a whole plethora of things called a fine-tuning problem. If you type in fine-tuning problem in YouTube, guess what you'll find? A bunch of people saying refutation of the fine-tuning argument. What's wrong with the fine-tuning argument? How we know fine-tuning is wrong? Of course you're going to say that, but this is where it actually comes from. It was reluctantly denoted that because fine-tuning, meaning it's intricately and meticulously designed. Fine-tuning requires a fine-tuner, designer, intention, determination, specific purpose, right? So it's called a fine-tuning problem because for you to call a fine-tuning problem, you showed your cards. The idea that it's finely tuned is a problem in your eyes because it's anything but God. That's a tell. That's why they call it the fine-tuning problem. Same thing that they say with the axis of evil. What is this, like, moral denotation or emotional descriptor of something that's supposed to be scientific because it goes against your idea that the earth is not special or unique or in a central position? It's not science. Those are religious terms. That's what that is. That's a religious term, right? It's the sacred cow of scientism, is religion. So when they say it's a fine-tuning problem, they tell you exactly what they're doing. The idea that this place is intricately or meticulously designed or finely tuned is a problem in their eyes. They must come up with an explanation void of being finely tuned, or determination, or intention, or purpose, or a creator. Anything. God. Some examples of this is the flatness problem, right? You have the cosmological constant crisis. You have all kinds of problems that fall under the finely tuned problem, right? And I think my favorite one is the flatness problem. The idea that it's 0.00070 something zeros 1. It's that close to 0, the density, so that the energy density, based on the specific value, right, that would, above or below that, cause curvature of the universe. When we look out, we see that it's flat. So they can't explain that. It doesn't make any sense. If there's a singularity that explodes, it's gonna either have negative or positive curvature. It's not gonna have the perfect energy density to expand out and be flat. So this is called the flatness problem. And it falls under the fine-tuning problem. Because how does it have just the perfect, mind-blowingly small amount of energy density that it creates a flat universe? That can't statistically happen randomly. It requires intention. It's very specific. They call it the flatness problem. Why is it a problem? Why is that a problem? Well, because it doesn't fit with the idea that there was some inanimate, insignificant, purposeless origin to the universe. That's it. They constantly show you that they're in a religion of scientism, and their MO is anything but God. That's why they call it fine-tuning problems, the flatness problem, the horizon problem. Okay? So we covered quite a few things here. I will kind of recap a lot of it really quickly, but I'm going to go ahead and apologize. It will be kind of fast, but we recapped the Hubble tension problem. That is, of course, the Hubble constant being the rate at which the universe supposedly expands. We went back into time to see where that came from. They said, well, the Earth is a tiny speck of dust in an insignificant corner of the universe tucked away, which means when we look out, based on the fact that there was a singularity and then everything expanded from there, which is the Big Bang Theory coined by Fred Hoyle, who was making fun of the idea, of course, comes from Lamontre, I always forget the dude's name, but a Jesuit priest who came up with the idea of the Big Bang Theory. Although, ironically, he actually said there was a pre-existing energy, which gave it a semblance of logical viability, but then they threw that part away, which is hilarious. They claimed there was a singularity, and then everything exploded and expanded out from that singular point, and then we're just tucked away over here in the corner. Based on statistical probability, the universe is so big, after 13 billion years, the odds are there's a little tiny speck of dust, a rock that we call the Earth, that eventually life could form on, and that's just so happens what we experience. We think it's special, but it's just ego or pride or lack of humility. It's not special. It's insignificant. It's tucked away in the middle of nowhere in some little bitty insignificant corner of the universe in a dark little forgotten area. But they looked out, and based on that mentality, that model, that cosmology, they should have saw redshift and blue shift. They should have saw things going left, right, up, down, moving all over the place, completely disregarding the Earth because it's insignificant. But that is not what they saw. Hillside, thank you for the super chat. So they were like, okay, now we have to move the goalposts and say, well, it does look like we're in the center, but anything but God. If the Earth's in the center of the universe, that means that someone had to place it there. So it looks like we're in the center. You can never disprove that we're in the center. Every observation is always going to look like we're in the center, but that's just an illusion. We're not in the center. We are tucked away in a little insignificant corner, 100% not important or special or unique. But it's always going to look like we're special or unique. It's always going to look like we're in the center. And then they came up with the idea that the universe was ever expanding in all directions, like a balloon with a little ant on the balloon looking around. They can't tell if they're not in the center. It looks like they're in the center, but they're not. And they said that that's the explanation for why we always see that we're in the center. Of course, then you get into, well, you said there was a singularity where everything expanded from, so how are you claiming there's no center to the universe now? Because if they claim there was a center to the universe, well, if we're on the Earth, again, we're looking out, we're going to see everything moving away from that center. So it's not just going to be looking like everything moves away from us, because it's all moving away from that central singularity where the Big Bang started, and that's not what they saw. So then that's when we get into the idea that the universe is expanding in its redshift, and then that rate at which it supposedly expands is called the Hubble constant. It's attributed to Hubble because Hubble was one of the ones that made the primary observations of the distant galaxies actually moving in relation to the Earth, which they should not have. So they had to come up with this idea that the universe is expanding. It's an accelerative expansion in all directions. It's called the Hubble constant, which is whatever the rate at which the universe expands is. They now say it's at the minimum just over 4 times the speed of light. So then we have the Hubble tension, where they look out, they make the measurements of this assumption of expansion with the cosmic microwave background, the ladder method of astronomy, 2 different methodologies and ways of measurement, right? Types of measurement, and they do not match. That's called the tension. There's tension there because they can't get it to match up. One of them is much smaller than the other one, and it's usually separated by 5 to 7 megaparsecs, which is an insane big, right? Even when they doctor the error bars. So that didn't work. We covered that. I think last stream or the stream before as well. So you also have the cosmological constant, the energy required to expand the universe at whatever unknown rate that doesn't match up and consistently doesn't work, and it gets worse and worse and worse over time. They can't come up with a way to actually figure out where this energy is, because they looked at the vacuum on the Earth, said, oh, there's energy here, this will fix our problem. But when they tried to apply it to the cosmological model, it was off by 10 to the 120th power. Of course, is 120 zeros. Not even close. One of the biggest discrepancies ever. That's why Michio Kaku said this is the biggest discrepancy between prediction and evidence in like the history of our field or of science or whatever he said. Okay, now a lot of people say, no, that can't be right, because it's so ridiculous that they just say, no, that's not right. But we don't know what it is. We don't know what dark energy is. But they call the cosmological constant dark energy. Cosmological constant is the energy that supposedly causes the Hubble constant, which is the expansion. You have the Hubble tension. You also have the horizon problem, the idea that there's a certain amount of time in the universe, which means that with the constant speed of light, speed equals the distance over time. So if you have 13.5 billion years of the universe, you have a constant speed of c, which means that's the maximum speed of light. So it's also the maximum speed of any particle carrying any information in the universe, which means if you have a set amount of time and a set of speed, you only have a finite distance that particle can go, yet that gives you a horizon, a maximum radius in all directions, a circle around you, the horizon. So that means that these particles cannot be interacting with other particles outside of their horizon, because they haven't had enough time to get that far, even if they were traveling the maximum speed of the universe, which is c, in their model. So that's called the horizon problem, because for them to be a homogeneous distribution of temperature and energy as they predict in their model, these particles would have had to engage and interact at some point in time within that Big Bang cosmology. So that's called the horizon problem. So we have the flatness problem, the flatness problem, the horizon problem, the cosmological constant problem, the Hubble constant problem being the Hubble tension. Okay. Then we also covered a lot of these fall under the fine-tuning problem. Like, what are the odds, statistically impossible, without some specific intention or determination? Now, that's the same problem as the fact that the Earth could be in the center. It means that it's like requires determination or a fine-tuner or a designer, right? Intention and determination is not on the table. To quote Hubble, it's a horrific idea. You must avoid at all costs the horror of a special and unique position. It's intolerable and will only be accepted as a last resort to save the phenomena, if it can't be explained any other way. We've seen that even when it can't be explained any other way, it's still not on the table. So again, back to the title, anything but God. That's why they call it the fine-tuning problem. I'm just recapping. Okay, so when we pile all this together, we also discovered that that's where they said, okay, well, that's why everything's redshifting, because everything's expanding away, and that's what makes it look like the Earth's in the center, but it's just an illusion. So the further things are away, the more they're going to be redshifting, because it's like the Doppler effect, so it's moving further and further away, right? Well, then when they looked out, they saw something called quasars, and they saw that they have way more redshift than the galaxies that are further away than the quasars, which cannot be explained because the stuff further away should have more redshift, which completely refutes their entire cosmology, as is the cosmic microwave background, with the axis of evil being anisotropic and inhomogeneous distribution that's centered on the Earth relative to the alleged 23.4 degree tilt, which should only be local if the Earth is what's tilted, making things look like they're on a tilted axis. That should only be local, but it seemed far out into space, far beyond anything that could be caused by the Earth allegedly tilting, wobbling, spinning, and revolving around the sun. So there's a bit of a recap, but here's the point, and here's the overarching theme. In all these situations, what they have done is gone to any extent required to avoid the idea that there's a designer. If they have to bring in the idea that this place was special or unique or placed here, that's not on the table. That's considered heretical. You're a heretic against scientism if you dare even utter the idea that this place is created or designed. So they will stop at nothing. The point that they make up the idea of dark matter, dark because it doesn't interact with the electromagnetic spectrum, and material because it has to explain the discrepancy of mass with a gravitational prediction, but it can't be detected, can't be defined, has never been observed, will never be in an experiment, never, ever, 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 ever detected in over a century. Dark energy, don't know what it is. Then they look back in the time and they also saw, I'm just recapping all the problems, just some of them actually, and they looked back and they saw, oh, some of these early galaxies that are closer to the Big Bang origin are way too formed, but they didn't have enough time to form based on the current model. So they're way too formed because they had to fix these other problems, the horizon problem, the flatness problem. They came up with something called inflation, which is why the current cosmology is called inflationary, because they said there's something called the inflaton. The inflaton, right, which ends up turning into all matter and energy. And at the very beginning of the universe was inflating, and this incredible inflation was at such a fast rate before it slowed down that it was curved, because it didn't have the magical perfect energy density to be flat, because that would require a creator, anything but God. So, oh well, there's something called the inflaton that can never be detected, never be found, never even be defined, but I promise it was there, trust us. And that actually straightened out the curvature. And then that's an attempt to also try to explain the horizon problem. There's just an immense inflation at the beginning to try to explain away the problems, even though it's just a made-up, unfalsifiable, pseudoscientific idea because it's a religion. Then they looked back, they saw that the galaxies are way too formed and way too big, some even bigger than the Milky Way galaxy. So they're like, okay, what's going on? Now they came up with the idea of early dark energy, that the dark energy at the beginning of the universe was just much stronger and much different than it currently is, even though they don't know what it currently is, it can't define it, but I promise it's there. But when they try to do that to explain the early formation of the galaxies being way too formed and way too big, that steps on the toes of inflation theory, which is because they're directly contradictory and can't be put together cohesively, which is a problem because then you bring back in the flatness problem and the horizon problem, many other fine-tuning problems that inflation tried to save, so they're at a standstill. The biggest death blow that was revealed in this, and we'll cover it in the future in the redshift, is the fact that they saw quasars with greater redshift, even though the galaxies were further away, but things further away should have greater redshift if everything's expanding away from you. So there you go. I know that was a lot, but basically what it all comes down to is, like, what does this person say? You don't have a model? Dude, first of all, I do have a model, and I'm actually working on it, and it's like 1,000,000 times better than anything that you think you believe in. Or you may be laughing at someone else. Sorry, I don't know. But the actual point of this is pointing out that they don't have a model, and even though that they'll tell you that they do, they don't. And basically, it's just anything but God, and usually it's just ego. People want to be their own God. They've been working on this for decades and for years. Just like the quote in that video, the famous astronomer was like, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning nowadays, and I'm like, has everything that I've ever done for my entire career been wrong? People cannot handle that, you know? Like the famous quote that it's very hard to get someone to understand something when their profession requires them not understand it. Right? That's the current situation that we're in. That's a large part of it. And then the philosophical undertones is the idea that we must explain everything without intention or determination or a designer or a fine-tuner or a creator or a God. Anything. God. Because that introduces purpose. Now we have purpose. Now we have moral accountability. Now I can't be a God. Now I can't tell everyone they should look up to me and I'm the most important thing in the world. I can't take credit for this incredible universe. But if there is no designer, I can take credit for starting to figure it out. So that's basically how it works. It's anything but God at all costs. Avoid the idea that there's some type of intention or determination or some type of intelligent design to this place. There's an intelligent designer, and they kind of get knocked down a notch. So now we're sitting here just at the forefront of physics and academics. We're just sitting here at standstills, compartmentalized pseudoscience that contradicts itself all over the place. For over a century, we've known about most of these problems. We're just sitting here waiting for someone to finally do something. And I can let you know, they're never going to do something unless they're forced. So, I know that was a lot. Sorry I just overloaded you guys, but there's a recap. I'm like tired after seeing all that. Justin Johnson, thank you for gifting another membership, brother. Very generous. Much love. Globe is a weak word. Boucher, Free Ball Bear, thank you for being a misfit for 2 months. All right, shout out to all the legends in the chat. Thank you guys for kicking it. Sorry if this stream was kind of like somewhat reiterative and fast and information overload. I apologize. Shout out to the Legends and Rokfin. Thanks for kicking it. Thank you for the $5 tip. Apple for the teacher cheers. Thank you, Xhelio, for the $5 tip on Rokfin. All right, cool. I had to travel down to Florida, which is why you can see I kind of got some sun to try to find, look at some houses. So pretty busy with that. Prayers are greatly appreciated, that everything works smoothly with that, and that we're able to financially figure out how to take care of the move and where we should stay. Of course, we trust Yah, but we do appreciate all prayers. Roger Kelly, thank you for the 5 memberships. Thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Mark Kelly, welcome to the Mistwits, whoever gets them. And we'll drop the exclusive merch here soon. Got a lot going on. I'm explaining it to you just to explain why I've been like doing a lot. Got a million things going on. It's going to be a very busy next month for me. We're obviously going to have to pack all this up and get everything ready to move out, and then get the moving truck and then go all the way down wherever we are moving once we find the house and finalize, and kind of have to try to come up with all the money, be able to pay for all that and the deposits and the upfront costs and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I got all that going on, and I will, of course, keep doing streams, but just let you guys know it's going to be a super hectic month for me, so bear with me, be patient, please. In addition, I think I'm doing a debate with Karen B Saturday on Modern Day Debate, 8 p.m. Eastern, if you want to check that out. Maybe tentatively Sunday, people that help rally around us after with Aaliyah's birth. We're going to have a private little ticket stream, but we'll announce that for sure soon. So shout out to all the people that helped support us in that time. Bryant Myers was lame, screwed me over. Cool. So Saturday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with Karen B, tentatively Modern Day Debate. Also, we got some big announcement about some other stuff coming up towards the end of the year, but we'll hold off on that until it's all finalized. Wednesday night, Schooling Globers. Ideally 9 p.m. Eastern. It could be 10 p.m. as you guys see, but I'll try to make it by 9 p.m. Like I said, a lot going on. Okay, cool. More about the community fast. I fell behind on all that. Trying to link up with everyone, get it all sent, smoothed out, and then we'll get it rocking here soon. If you do want to be a part of that, you can get the blends down in the description. You'll get shot an email with the private Telegram group. All right, that's most of the recaps. This was an amazing stream. Good luck with everything. Thank you. Please remember to take care of yourself too. Thanks for all you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Just a lot going on. All right. Thank you guys for kicking it. Links to support the stream in the description. Check my PO box this week, and I'll try to. Sunday's gonna be super busy for me, but Sunday morning I'll try to finally do. I was out of town this week. I'll try to. I do have some packages from a couple weeks ago and a letter. If anyone sends anything to the PO box this week, if it gets here by Friday, and I'll open it up on stream. Sunday morning is the plan on Witsit's biscuits and gravy. Yeah, and of course the PO box will be changing here soon. So if you're gonna send anything to the PO box, make sure you get it here before like the end of the month. Like a little before the end of the month, maybe a week before the end of the month. I would say if you don't send anything more than 2 weeks from now to that PO box, so it's going to shut down. Just so you guys know, I'll try to remind everyone on every show, and then I'll let you guys know what the new PO box is. Cool. We'll get everything smoothed out. We'll get the new setup. We'll get everything in place, and once we get everything smoothed out, we'll get to kind of get a nice, consistent schedule. That's a pretty good day. And so Wednesday night we have Schooling Globers. All right, cool. Seek and speak truth unequivocally. The weak find contentment in the consensus of ignorance. So who cares what other people think? They're always going to attack you. They're going to shoot the messenger. And again, people are going to just try to conform to consensus until they're told by their approved leaders of thought what to think. Don't worry about them when they revile you for his name's sake or for the truth's sake. Rejoice. As they did it to all the prophets before you, they always attack people seeking truth, speaking truth, especially whenever they do it unequivocally, and they're not scared, and they kind of admire you in a way. So I would just look at it like that. What's popular is not true. What's true is rarely popular. So just speak the truth regardless of what other people think. It'll always work out in the end. Shout out to all the people that support the channel. Thanks for all the prayers. Prayers are greatly appreciated for us to figure out where we're supposed to stay, when we're supposed to go there, how we're supposed to get there, and how we're supposed to financially figure it all out. Greatly appreciated to all the people that have been praying for us. Cool. Catch up with you guys Wednesday for Schooling Globers. Till then, peace.
Name
Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Mickelson Morley. It showed that the earth they don't move, huh? What they do, sure ain't a link to the ruler. Hey, that's just how they fooled ya. Tune in Wednesdays, bet that we gon' school ya. Mickelson Morley, it showed no displacement. Mickelson, Gale, Pearson, it measure rotation. Let's break it down in layman. That means the earth is stationed. No planets and spaceships, they're all animations. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend. Relatively speaking. First day after the weekend.